Moving on to the Middle East. If Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice said it once, she said it a dozen times. Any ceasefire at the Israeli-Lebanese border would have to include what she called a change in the status quo ante. Among other things, Hezbollah would have to be disarmed. President Bush called it a forward strategy of freedom. Now, a week later, there is a ceasefire, but Hezbollah is still there, and Israeli politics is in disarray. So in the end, did the ball move, Andrea?
Well, the ball moved, but not in the United States direction or in Israel's direction. The good news is that the ceasefire has been, for the most part, holding. That is obviously good. But Hezbollah has been so empowered by this. The perception around the world has been that Hezbollah is the winner. And the president, of course, rejects this, said that this was just Hezbollah propaganda, what you would expect. But when you really look at what's happening on the ground, there is a vacuum, and Hezbollah has moved into that vacuum. They were handing out $12,000 in cash per person today, money they get from Iran. As Tom Friedman, our friend and colleague, pointed out, Iran has all of this money from its oil surpluses, and this is the money that is being channeled to Hezbollah, going to the Lebanese, and they are the visible presence on the ground, rebuilding Lebanon, actively rebuilding Lebanon. The United States doesn't get there yet, and the West is really being trumped by Hezbollah.
It sounds like a status quo ante to me. It sounds like just the way it was before the United States got involved.
Any way you look at it, this UN resolution was such a watered-down compromise. It does not require the disarming of Hezbollah. It does not require a military force with explicit military powers under the UN. So it doesn't reach the level of what Secretary Rice said she was demanding, so it does beg the question, why did the United States wait so long? And the net result is you have an Israeli government in disarray and a United States administration so identified with Israeli failure right now that it hurts the United States around the world.
Well, that's what I wondered. It's really not a status quo ending here. It's worse than that for the United States and for Israel. Now, how will that play out? You know, if this reflects badly on Israel and the United States, what does that mean?
There's no good scenario right now unless this magically turns around and they manage to get this deployment, and they're having difficulties there, because Israel is perceived to be weaker, and that can only encourage Israel's enemies. This is the first major defeat for Israel's military force. There are investigations that they themselves have called on, how did this happen? You've got the resignation today of the Justice Minister. The Army Chief of Staff is himself under investigation for stock trading. The Prime Minister is potentially under investigation for a mortgage deal. They have huge issues there. So with a weakened Israel and with America having been so much in Israel's corner, it does not help the United States in the Arab world. And I have to say, if you look at the mainstream media around the world, everywhere other than in the United States, it is remarkably pro-Hezbollah. Hezbollah at this point is being described in most places now as a social service organization and a legitimate part of the Lebanese government, not as a terror group.
A model that they seem to be using throughout the Middle East, if you look in Iraq as well. One question I have, Andrea, is where do they get these troops? I mean, this is part of the resolution, but that's got to be tough. And the troops they get, how good will they be?
They're going to have another meeting next week. They're talking about Nepal, Bangladesh, and Malaysia, but these are Muslim countries that don't recognize Israel. And as the Deputy Secretary General admitted today, Mark Malloch Brown, you can't really have a peacekeeping force if one party in the dispute, even if it isn't on Israeli territory, it's in Lebanon, but you can't really have a peacekeeping force that's not well regarded and trusted by both sides. That is a real problem.
What happened to France, Italy, and Germany?
France is the question.
Italy and Germany will be there, but Jacques Chirac announced that he would only add 200 more engineers to the 200 that have been in place in the United Nations force. So France has not delivered. The president today put some more pressure verbally on Jacques Chirac, our good friends the French, to deliver. But so far the Europeans have not come up, and they claim they're going to have 3,500 additional troops by August 28th. That's a stretch.
That just seems inexplicable to me, how the French would promote a resolution and then not back it up with more offers of troops. But is there something going on? They say they're uncertain about what the rules of engagement are going to be on the ground.
The problem is the resolution that eventually was accepted. The French did propose with the United States a stronger resolution, but that was objected to by the Arab world. And what was eventually accepted did not have explicit rules of engagement, did not have real military force behind it, did not call for the disarming of Hezbollah, and they don't want to go into a shooting war. So they say that it is not an adequate resolution to guarantee their troops' safety.
And at the root of this, of course, is a ceasefire, which isn't all that strong, at least. It's still fragile at this point. So the story is still percolating. Thanks.